Hello everyone. Have a wonderful day. Today, we step into a rain-washed village house where Tieu and Uri film a waiting corner commercial pretending to be expectant parents. Between a wicker cradle crowned with marigolds, tiny socks, winter melon tea, and lines that start sounding like real promises, we'll watch a family for show begin to feel like a family for life. There's tension, tenderness, and a choice. Keep pretending or make room for the truth. If this journey moves you, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next videos. Hold the bump, softer hands. Think of the heartbeat. The director's whisper threads through the blue-painted room as rain frets against the eaves. A wicker cradle sits between Tieu and Uri, its mosquito net a pale cloud. On the table, a folded blanket, 2 tiny socks, a prop ultrasound pinned at the corner of a corkboard. Uri's palm hovers over Tieu's abdomen, not touching, almost like you do when you're scared to wake a dream. Action. Tieu inhales. She counts to 3 as if waiting for a kick that will never come. Her eyes find Uri's. The script says, "We're not just buying things, we're building a home." What she says is almost that. What her face says is not pretend at all. Cut. The director exhales, half laugh, half prayer. That's the truth we need. Reset for the cradle shot. They've been filming a series called Waiting Corner Domestic Tenderness, sold in 2-minute doses. Niche, the client bragged. Village craft meets modern family. Today's ad is the anchor. A couple waiting for their baby, staging and story borrowed like a wedding dress that fits better than expected. The cradle is real. The baby is not. Hours earlier, the forest was a cathedral of wet light. Uri levered a dull shovel under the roots of wild ginger, while sunlight needled through the canopy, polishing the sweat on his forearms. Careful, Tieu warned, fingers searching out the red-veined threads without tearing them. Their movements synced the way practiced kindness does. He steadied. She unwound. Soil loosed its hold. Birds stitched music over the scrape of metal and the thud of loosened clods. For the tea scene, she said, cupping a bulb like it was already medicine. Something honest under the pretense. Uri grinned. Honest sells. Don't ruin it, she teased and looked away first. They cut marigolds where the path bent toward the stream garlands, not for vows this time, but for the cradle they would dress. A simple spell against emptiness. Our prop list is getting sentimental, Uri said, trimming the stems. Blanket, socks, a cardboard calendar with due dates. We're borrowing the future. Only till the client signs off, she answered, too quickly. By noon, the house was warm with kettle steam and winter melon jam. Rain began its percussion. Soft, then harder, then full choir. The oil lamp found them at the little table Tieu, slicing herbs with a rhythm that made its own weather. Uri threading marigolds through the cradle's wicker lattice, pausing now and then like he'd heard something move in the next room. "You're far away," she said. "It's nothing." Which, from Uri, meant he hadn't found words big enough yet. Uncle Lin's warning had lodged in him like a splinter. Someone paid a kid on a scooter to rattle Tieu outside the market last week after the morning wrap. A test, a message, or a sign that their show had started to matter in the wrong ways. "The tea smells amazing," he said instead, letting the steam fog his lashes. He held out a spoon of jam. She tasted and smiled, the kind of small joy that makes a room feel like a vow. They set the scene. The crew arrived, dripping umbrellas and laughter. Aunties from 2 doors down brought sesame candies for luck. A neighbor's little boy pressed his nose to the window until the assistant waved him in to clap the slate. The cradle wore marigolds like a crown. The socks sat like punctuation marks in the cradle's curve. The prop ultrasound, grainy as rain, pinned the whole thing to a wall it didn't belong to. "Ready?" the director asked. Uri nodded. Tu Tieu smoothed the blanket with both hands to hide their tremor. Action. They played the couple who measures time in weeks and cravings. The couple who laughs at midnight when the floorboard squeaks. The couple who leans into a future like it will lean back. The camera pushed in on hands, withdrew on smiles, drifted over the marigolds so that the petals looked like little suns warming the space between them. Uri's hand hovered again. He let it land this time, feather light on the dress over her belly. No one told him to. No one told him not to. "Cut," the director said, voice gone strange. "Keep that. We will move to the market at 10. They broke the set gently, as if loudness could spook the air. The rain thickened into a white curtain, while the crew carried gear to the covered stall by the gate. The market itself blurred, silver roofs shivering, tarps snapping, voices turned to flecks of sound. Tu Tieu arranged the herb bundles for the tea segment. Ginger, lemongrass, the bright green leaves she had dried last summer. 2 cakes soaked in syrup and memory waited in wax paper near the kettle. "After the ad," Uri said, quietly beside her. "We'll talk." "About what we're borrowing," she answered, not a question. "About whether we want to return it," he said, and then the world sent in Lynn. "How've you been, sister?" Lynn's voice could be honey. Today it was rainwater in a glass, clear, cold, holding no flavor of its own. She stepped under the awning, like a guest invited by the weather. Her raincoat made her smaller. Her stare made her large. "We're on schedule," Tu Tieu said, the gentlest way she knew to say no. Uri came forward out of the crew's shadow, face ironed flat. The shop owner had texted the photos an hour ago. A blurred figure on a scooter, a handoff near the corner where the ginger cellar sits. The kind of evidence that is enough to prove damage and never enough to heal it. "You hired someone to scare her," he said, not bothering to raise his voice over the rain. "The market will carry a quiet truth farther than a shout." Lynn's chin tilted. "You're acting again. The cradle, the socks, the waiting." She glanced at the crew, all ears beneath plastic ponchos. Sweet script. Careful not to choke on it. Uri showed the screen pixels beaded with rain, proof running like watercolor. "This isn't a script move," he said. "You hurt your own sister to scrape shares." Tu Tieu felt her hands go cold even while the kettle sang. She knew Lynn's scorn, her careful cruelties, the way love for family turned serrated when money entered the room. But there's knowing, and then there's watching a match struck in your name. "Say you didn't," Tu Tieu whispered. "Not for the crew, not for Uri, for the piece of childhood that still held Lynn by the wrist in a flood." Lynn's gaze flickered. She touched the cradle's marigold with one finger like a blessing or curse. "You think borrowed vows make a house. You think a camera can teach you how to love. Be careful, little sister. Pretend long enough and the debt comes due." Uri stepped between them. A movement so simple, it felt like signing something. "Harm her again," he said, soft as rain on the edge of the awning, "and I won't forgive it. She is the mother to be in this ad my partner on set. He stopped, as if the word had tripped him. "My family for the day." Silence like a held breath. Then the director's voice, thin and far away. "Places. We make our day, or the storm will eat it." Lynn looked down first. The rain made a small sea around her shoes. "Keep your show," she said, and turned into the weather, dissolving by degrees. Uri stood a heartbeat longer, watching the space where she'd been. Then he turned back to Tu Tieu, to the kettle, to the cradle wearing a crown of sun. "After this take," he said, returning to the promise he'd made before the interruption, "we talk." The assistant director slid the slate into the frame. "Scene 24, market tea for two waitin' for baby," he called, voice brave against the storm. The camera's red light bloomed. Action. Rain silvers the awning, while the market holds its breath. The camera finds their hands' first steam, ghosting from two chipped cups. Tu Tieu's fingers steadying Uri's as if heat were a thing you share. The cradle sits framed in the background, marigolds bright as small suns, socks like commas in an unfinished sentence. The line on the cue card reads, "We wait together." Uri doesn't look at it. "We wait," he says, voice low, "and we make room." It lands like a promise pretending to be a copy. Tu Tieu answers on the exhale. She was supposed to say, "Because every home begins with care." What she says is, "Then we'll clear a drawer, and the top shelf, and the parts of ourselves that never learned to be gentle." "Cut," the director whispers, the word a soft apology to the moment. "Hold that tone." Slow push to the cradle for the button. They reset with hands that know better than to touch what's still warm. A child squeals as an auntie pinches his cheek for fidgeting. A pig complains somewhere off mic. The rain turns the alley beyond to a watercolor that can't decide which way to run. "Ready?" the operator calls. "Action." The camera glides past their faces to the cradle. On cue, Tu Tieu reaches in and smooths the blanket. Uri tucks the socks deeper, as if drafts could sneak in from a future they haven't earned. The lens lingers long enough to make space feel inhabited. The assistant swallows a sob she'll deny later. The red light blinks out. "That's the ad," the director says, hoarse with what he won't name. If the client wants shinier, they can buy shiny somewhere else. The crew exhales into chatter. Plastic ponchos crinkle. Someone cheers. Someone else bargains for noodles. In the pocket of noise, Uri slips two syrup-soaked cakes into Tu Tieu's palm, the same ones he'd meant to use like a bandage. "Still warm," he says. "Still sweet," she answers, even though the place between sweetness and fear is where today lives. They pack carefully. The cradle rides in the back of the van, marigolds nodding like yes men. On the walk home, the rain thins to a thread you can step through if you time it. The blue-painted house opens like a held breath. Uri hooks his jacket on the nail. Tu Tieu lights the lamp. The room remembers them. They sit on the floor, with the small table between them, the size of a question they can finally answer. Uri pulls the spoon through the winter melon jam, the way a man rehearses courage. "Uncle Lin was right," he says. "The boy on the scooter was paid. I think we both know by whom." "Lin," she says, and it's not a question. She presses her thumb into the wood grain until it leaves a pale crescent. I keep thinking there's a version where she stops before she breaks the things she wants to own. I keep thinking I can block the wind without telling you a storm is coming. He meets her eyes. I won't do that again. Silence folds around them, not empty, just precise. Outside, rain worries the banana leaves and then gives up. The oil lamp hushes the shadows into soft edges. The cradle looks like a guest they're not sure how to feed. You said we'd talk, Tu Tieu reminds him, the gentlest kind of insistence, about what we're borrowing, and about whether we return it, he says. He reaches into his pocket and brings out something that looks like nothing. 3 lengths of string, a bent paperclip, a button the color of a ripe long gone. I was going to make a mobile, he admits, almost shy. For the shot. He smiles, helpless. For the house. She laughs, surprised by the sweetness of it. Show me. They bend together over the small task, the way people do when they are choosing a life by practicing it. Uri ties the strings. Tu Tieu tests the balance with her fingertip. The button spins, catching lamplight and throwing it like a quiet disco into the beams. There, she says, pleased. Wind from the fan won't bully it. We don't own a fan, he replies. We'll borrow one, she says, and they both hear the arrow of it. A knock interrupts the thread between them. 3 soft taps. A pause. 2 more. The neighbor's little boy peers around the door frame. The aunties flank him like a choir that knows every verse. We brought a mango, the bravest says, for the waiting. The boy points at the cradle. When? He asks. Soon, Uri says automatically, script in his throat. Tu Tieu looks at the makeshift mobile in her hands, then at Uri, then at the boy who believes everything he hears until someone teaches him not to. When we're ready, she says instead. The aunties approve with approving noises. They leave a paper bag of sesame candies, a prayer in the shape of food. The door slides shut. The house settles on its haunches like an animal choosing to trust. They eat mango over the sink, laughing when juice finds elbows. They argue gently about whether to hang the mobile tonight or tomorrow. They lose track of where the ad ends and the evening begins. Later, the cradle wears the marigolds like a crown, and the mobile like a secret, and the socks sleep like punctuation. I don't know if we're brave, Uri says at last, the kind of confession that makes the air kinder. I only know that when I put my hand there this afternoon. He touches the air above her abdomen, not quite touching her. I wanted it to be real enough that pretending wouldn't hurt. Tu Tieu steps closer, so the gap between not quite and yes closes itself. Real is not a baby, she says, careful with each word. Real is a drawer cleared, and a shelf, and the part of you that tells me before the storm arrives. He nods. Then let's start real. They pull the cradle from the set line into the room's center. They take the prop ultrasound down and pin up a blank page where dates could live when dates are ready. They fold the tiny socks and place them not as props, but as hope that won't bankrupt them if it takes time. They leave the door unlatched because family is a thing that enters differently when invited. Night takes the windows. The lamp lowers its voice. On the table lies the call sheet for tomorrow morning. Market B-roll. Noon. Home scene. 2. Evening. Pack. Niche work. neat rows. The calendar laughs. Under it, a scribble in Uri's handwriting. Bye, fan. Learn to wait well. They sleep badly and well in turns, like all new promises do. Morning arrives clean as a peeled lychee. The rain has spent itself. In the market, the noodle lady pretends not to notice the way the camera dotes on them. "You two again," she says, loading their bowls higher than the budget. "Eat. Waiting takes strength." They shoot the B-roll while walking, the ordinary kind of light that flatters honesty. Back home, the final setup glows. Tea, cradle, doorway ajar to the tamarind tree, mobile ready to turn in a breeze they haven't bought yet. "One more for safety," the director says, softer than yesterday. "Let it breathe." Action. They don't say much. Uri pours. Tu Tieu tastes. The camera leans in and finds it. Not the performance of a family, but its rehearsal, breaking into song. When cut comes, it sounds less like an ending than like the first deep breath after a long swim. The crew packs cables. The house keeps what it's owed. The cradle waits without hurrying anyone. And the two of them are no longer only a family for show, standing in the doorway, listening for a heartbeat they don't need a prop to hear.
Từ Tieu và Uri quay quảng cáo góc chờ đợi giả vợ và chờ một em bé, và lúc bình minh họ hái thảo mộc và cúc vạn thọ. Đến trưa mưa ghim chặt toàn phim dưới mái hiên chợ, một chiếc nôi mây, đôi tất nhỏ xíu và một máy siêu âm được ghim tạo lên một ngôi nhà để trình diễn. Nhưng lời thoại của họ trở lên riêng tư. Uri đối chất với Linh vì đã trả tiền cho một cậu bé để dọa tử Tieu, sau đó thừa nhận rằng cậu ta đã cố gắng bảo vệ cô bằng cách giữ im lặng. Trở lại ngôi nhà xanh, trà bí đao, bánh ngọt chia sẻ và một bàn tay lơ lửng trên bụng, cô đã chuyển giọng điệu của quảng cáo từ bản sao sang lời hứa. Họ dựng một chiếc điện thoại di động, dọn dẹp ngăn kéo và quyết định chỉ giữ lại những gì chân thật buổi sáng mang đến. Máy quay kết thúc nhưng chiếc nôi vẫn còn đó, đạo cụ mượn, sự chờ đợi thực sự và một gia đình bắt đầu giữa các lần quay.